Hey.
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 How are you doing?
So black-striped unicorns. Does everyone know what a black-striped unicorn is? That's kind of a weird, we have all these weird names for unicorns now.
We didn't make them.
Yeah, black-striped though. It's, from what I've been told, it means you've been bootstrapped.
Bootstrapped,
for
profitable.
The most part. Yeah.
Which unlike a lot of the other ones, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, what's up with that?
Did you say the P word?
I did.
Profitable, you guys.
Yeah. Oh.
Weird concept. There seems to be quite a few unicorns. There's about 4 unicorns in Utah right now. And a lot of them had to start out bootstrapping the business. A lot of companies in Utah, but you both in particular had to bootstrap from the very beginning. And you're famous for saying you should bootstrap for at least 10 years. That sounds crazy.
Yeah, it does sound crazy when you say it that way. Well, I think probably the commonality that we both have is that we both bootstrapped. I think one of the problems, and I actually think it's a good thing, but I think one of the problems I see now is if you would have taken a snapshot of where we were 3 years in or 5 years in or 7 years in, it looks nothing like the business we have today. And so the fact that while we were figuring it out, which most companies are going to have to do, that we didn't take outside capital and we just kind of found a way to get through, it actually set us up good for where we are today. And I think too many companies take money early, they peak too early, and then when it actually gets interesting, they have no optionality, they don't own their company, where if you look at both of our cases, we took venture funding, I took venture funding 10 years in, and actually Ryan Sweeney, who was just here, was one of my investors who found us, and it's all additive. I mean, he's helping us actually hit our stride at the right time.
Here's the weird thing about Utah though, right? I mean, it probably, not only were you bootstrapped, but you probably had to bootstrap for so long because you're all the way over in Utah.
Yeah.
People don't know who you are until you've gotten big.
That's what I was going to say. Is for me, it wasn't like any grand plan in the beginning that, hey, I'm going to wait for 10 years to raise. I mean, it was more of, like, I didn't know, like, how to do it.
What is PluralSight in Utah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
that?
the thing was, we didn't really have any other option. Like, we were just doing our thing. We had an idea we were super passionate about. And we just wanted to figure it out. We wanted to start making money, have something that was sustainable, and we were thinking long term, like we want to build a company that we're proud of that lasts for a long time. And it wasn't until we got 9 years in, like Ryan, that we realized that, okay, now we're at a stage where the money is actually going to be super helpful to accelerate the business and actually get people like you to pay attention to who we are.
Yeah.
Because at the time, like, no one knew who we were, but we were, you know, in tens of millions of revenue, profitable, growing over 100% a year, and it was, we still couldn't get journalists to help us out, like to say, hey, what's this interesting? So it was almost like because we were profitable at the time and doing our thing, we weren't exciting enough to write about.
Right, who wants to write about?
Exactly, and what's interesting now, like with everything that's happening now in the public markets, all of a sudden, the tables have turned and things have flipped, and now all of a sudden we're like the interesting story, so it's kind of ironic.
You're very interesting. This is what I think is kind of crazy, though, is that people didn't know who you were for a good decade or so until you actually raised VC funding, and that's actually the crazy part, right? Because you're giving away part of your value to take in VC funding.
Like having built both businesses, like it's almost like the tale of two stories. Like we built this business up to this point, and then we scaled with funding. This one's a lot harder to build than this one, right? And so I think that, you know, it's like all of a sudden we've arrived. And so I think my advice for entrepreneurs here, I mean, this is startup grind, and it's kind of coincidental that it's a bootstrapped organization, and Derek's found a way to do all this with his team, and it's absolutely fabulous to watch. But like, don't get caught up looking and say, hey, we have to be a unicorn, we have to do this. No, you're trying to create a business that's going to change the world. That's what you have to do. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Don't let someone else determine your success. And I think that we did it out of necessity in Utah. I mean, I specifically remember someone came up to me and was like, I don't know if it was like the Silicon Valley Angels or the Utah Angels. They're like, hey, I'm with the Utah Angels after I was given some lecture. And I was like, what is that, a baseball team? Like, we didn't know what that was. And so I didn't know what Silicon Valley was. I didn't know it wasn't ever an option for us.
You were just building a business.
And we just found a way. And that's what most entrepreneurs will do. They'll find a way if you give them a long enough runway.
I think it's about what form of validation you want as an entrepreneur. Like here, I think in the Valley, there's a very clear sense of validation you get from raising money. Like credibility with people around you, you're fighting for talent. How do I get people to believe in me?
Especially where you raise money from.
Exactly. And so I think that's why it happens a lot more here than it does in other places, because you're kind of seeking that early validation. You want that early because it helps you build your team and accelerate. But what I've learned and what Ryan has experienced is that making something work is a longer term form of validation that's more powerful. So you kind of trade one. You can't have them both.
I think some of the startups get stuck here, though, right? Because of that validation. Because there's so much pressure to grow really fast. You can raise that money, so you can get some press around it. You can get people to notice who you are. There's a lot of pressure around that to think short term.
Right.
What do you have to say to these companies that are caught in that?
My first media interview was with Forbes in 2012. Right? We were almost 50,
And you were,
50 million sales.
Yeah.
It's 10 years in.
30 million cash. I'd never done a press release or never done a media interview. So when I hear people say, oh, we're starting our company, we just got to get our marketing and our swag and everything else done up, I'm like, wow, that's like the tail wagging the dog. You don't need to do it that way.
You have some pretty nice swag at your place.
We
though.
do.
I
We
took
take pride
a tour of
in
his place.
swag, right?
Yeah.
But
got like a closet full.
reality is you're getting focused on the wrong things. What you want is your customers telling the world how good you are and the movement that you're creating, as opposed to you having to do it or the media having to do it. And that is something that's sustainable and goes for a very, very long time. And that's from a VC standpoint, that's what they're really looking for, is a movement.
It's product market fit. It's like it's nailing that. And then and really developing something that delivers value to your customer.
I think that's kind of that's an obvious. Isn't that obvious?
It seems obvious, but it's not
make money. Isn't that?
I mean, but it's different. Like if you're focusing primarily on delivering value and what that means to a customer, that's different than kind of focusing on all the stuff that we were just talking about around the noise and the credibility that comes from that. I mean, in some businesses, you need that stuff to like get the word out as part of the marketing machine to make people take notice. But if there is a trade-off in terms of how much time you spend on those things. And if you bring in investors too early before you figured that out, they can disrupt the process of you trying to like really get to that product market fit, to have the flexibility to move more slowly.
Does it boggle your mind when you hear of companies that like you click a button and someone gets a yo and they raise money, or you Uber over a stylist to dress you and they raise money, or it just...
Well, I mean...
Does it boggle your mind that some of these companies are getting...
I think it has a lot to do with if the game you play here versus where you do it elsewhere, which is why I think this is an interesting conversation, because I think here, maybe one of the fundamental challenges is the fight for talent. Like maybe that's really what it's about, and if you don't raise early enough, you're just not going to compete for that. Like maybe that's one of the root drivers.
I think there's a misconception. Something that I was very fortunate but accidentally stumbled upon is I had an opportunity to hang out with a couple CEOs who had exited their companies. And I saw them like playing golf every day, and they weren't happy, and they were trying to get back in the game. And I was like, wait a minute, like how long are you going to do this? And every entrepreneur should be asking themselves, like, how long am I going to do this? And I figured out I'm going to do this forever. So I became very focused on the long-term gain. And the number one thing I see when I see CEOs is they're building this, hey, I'm going to get a flip, or I'm going to be like this, and nothing ever happens that way. As opposed to, hey, I'm going to give this 20 years. And we're playing the long game, and I don't know just clicking a button or doing those things if that plays into that.
What is the long game for you?
I mean, for me, look, we started...
Is it staying private for... I mean, we have companies that are staying private
we started in
forever.
academia, right? So if you would have taken a snapshot for the first 7 years, we only targeted universities. How many of you use Qualtrics in university? Anyone? All right, so some hands go up, right? Well, if you would have looked at that business, it wasn't very sexy, but then all those people graduated and took us into the corporation, in the corporate world, in the enterprise, and now we have 8,500 enterprises. So the combination of that business and that business is where we're at today, and we're going to keep building that out. And for me, that's what I get up and want to go do every morning when I wake up.
I've heard that there's not a lot of rumors about companies that are tech companies that are going to IPO this year. Last year we saw a pitifully small amount. This year we haven't seen much. But I have heard that both of you might IPO this year. Can you comment on that?
I'll let Aaron go first.
Not really. So, I mean, I would
it would
say-
make sense for you to IPO.
Well, certainly we're at this stage, both of our companies are at this stage where we're able to. And so the real question is it the right next step for the business strategically? I think for both of us, because we're both focused on enterprise, the enterprise market, there is a certain amount of credibility that comes from being a public company that facilitates your enterprise go-to-market strategy and your growth and your credibility with those big, large customers. So I think for both of our companies, I can't speak for Ryan, but it probably will make sense.
Please do, because then I'm not saying
at some point. I think it will make sense for us. But for me, it's about thinking.
At some point this year?
I can't really comment on that in particular, but I think with what's happening in the public markets, it's not likely. Like it's just messy out there, right? Like it's not a favorable time to do that. We're not in a desperate need for money. Like we're profitable. We have a sustainable business model.
Isn't that the best time to IPO or take money is when you don't need it?
Not when the public markets are doing what they're doing, I think.
It's scary out
there. So it is. Like, why would we, right? Like it doesn't, like a lot of people I think would look at us and think we'd be pretty crazy to try to do that right now. So, I think a lot needs to unfold over the next year for both of our stories to really figure out what the right timing might look like. And when I think about is that a good decision for our company, I think more about what is our aim as a company. We are trying to democratize professional learning for developers and IT professionals globally. Like that's what we want to do. We want to make high quality education available to them regardless of where they live in the world. And so if IPOing the company, going public facilitates that mission for us, then we would choose to do it. If it helps with that long-term thinking. And my thinking on this has changed a lot over the years because a few years ago I would have thought IPO is kind of a shorter-term thing. Like it feels like, like an end game for a lot of people. And it hasn't.
Where do you go after IPO? I mean, what do you mean it's a shorter-term thing?
Well, I actually think like that trajectory, if you think about it right in terms of building the right board of directors, thinking about long-term leadership of the company, and getting to a level of scale as a public company where you are credible and you have the right people involved to keep the business running for dozens and dozens of years beyond that point, you've done something pretty special and magical that aligns with the problem you're trying to solve. So anyway, that's how I think about it.
Ryan, what do you think?
So first of all, I think right now we're bigger than some of the companies that are public that we're seeing struggle right now, which is a great spot to be in. I think we'll be a great public company. I think that I don't know many SaaS companies or big companies in tech that have an opportunity like we have that aren't public. But our goal is to create a multi-generational company. And that's what we want to do. And I think going public's part of that. I think the fortunate thing is we have optionality, right? And this is where young entrepreneurs are giving up optionality. That's the biggest thing of everything we're reading about and all the downturn and all of this is, there's a lot of smart people that have invested in these companies and they have rights and they have ratchets and they have, they're involved with these businesses and you're seeing optionality be taken away, which to me defeats the entire purpose of being an entrepreneur. We're an entrepreneur so we can write our own story. But why would I be an entrepreneur if someone else was writing my story? So the good thing is in both cases is we can write our own stories and for me, that's the holy grail to be in, and I want to say we're smart, and I want to say...
You put yourself in a position where you can make the decisions. You don't...
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies
Ryan Sweeney backstage was like, hey, Ryan, when are we going public, right? So, he was just joking around with me. He's like, answer that question, I'll raise my hand. But he's serious. It's like, no, we're going to go when the business is right, and we're going to do that.
When is the business right for you?
Well, I think the key is to be ready as soon as possible.
As soon as possible,
so
like
you
this
can
year.
go. You can go when you want to go, right? Just because you're ready doesn't mean that you're going to go. But we already act like a public company. I mean, our board's acting like we're public. We're going through this where we're sitting there saying, hey, what are our projections? We're practicing. You know, we've gone through audited financials for a long time. I mean, we're sitting here, you know, trying to replicate, is this going to be a good thing for the business?
You've also said before that transparency is very important to you in your business, right? Down to opening up what was said in the board meeting, what employees are paid, to everybody in the company. Do you, as you've gotten bigger, are you still big on that, or have you?
I don't think I think a lot of people have written about it. There was an HBO article out there on radical transparency and this new notion. I don't think there's another option. I think once someone's experienced transparency and they go to like the opposite of that, like you can't function. And with millennials, like you're hiring people to come in and think, but you're not giving them the information that they need to like be able to think. And so if you think that people are going to be able to just read your mind and understand the problems of the business for these young creatives that can actually go do something, but you're not going to give it to them, you know, that's going to be hard. And I know that that's tricky when it comes to being a public company, but companies have done it. You know, I think Google's done a good job, and I think LinkedIn's done a pretty good job. And
yeah, I mean, there's a great new example of this, which is Atlassian, one of the best tech IPOs of 2015, right at the end of the year. Culture very similar to ours. We believe in all these same things about transparency. They decided when they went public that they were going to make all of their employees insiders, so that they could have access to all the information because they cared so much about the culture of transparency. So, you know, we have some people in front of us in this process who have shown like how you can do this successfully, which is really encouraging.
Yeah, and are either of you looking at, Utah's extremely white, extremely, it's like 92% of the state is white. And then the other big minority is Hispanic, and it's
he's
like-
pretty bronze. I mean, look at this tan he's got
It's
going.
an extremely white state, but we're looking at Silicon Valley has a diversity problem. Do you take diversity into account in Utah? Because I think that'd be interesting to see if you guys were maybe showing up Silicon Valley with, do you have that conversation?
So Utah, and we have 6 different offices globally, right? And there's a different challenge in each office, which is kind of cool to see, because we were just one office 18 months ago, but we have Dublin, we have Sydney, we have Seattle, and it's a different challenge in each one. The one thing that I would like to talk more about is we are growing our talent. You either have 2 choices. You either buy your talent from the outside or you grow it.
But do you consider all voices are important to consider?
You can't scale a business with taking out half the playing field. I mean, half your workforce is got to be, I mean, from a diversity standpoint, and there's just no way to scale. The key is probably not what's happening now. It's, hey, we're all talking about it. We're all working through this. What do the next 5 years look like? What do the next 10 years look like? And it's not just coders. It's executives. It's everyone. And we have to grow a lot. I mean, I'd say 80% of my workforce is homegrown. First job out of college or first couple jobs to come in there.
How do you find your talent?
I mean, the thing I was going to say on this is, I think we try, because the pool's a little bit different in Utah than other places, that we have to try a little bit harder to bring in diversity. But I think if you walk the halls of either of our companies...
We also have the Utah stigma, which, I mean, it's a lovely place. I grew up there, but it's lovely. People don't know that till they go there.
No, I mean, there's a lot of really amazing things about the Utah society and the culture that leads to, I think, why we've been successful. So there's kind of the pros and the cons. Like, you have a little bit less diversity to pull from. You can challenge that and change that by being proactive about it, which I think both of our companies do. But then some of the societal things, like just the cultural fabric of Utah, I think is what leads to a really healthy company culture as well, at least for those offices, that then transcends to our remote offices. We, like them, have like 6 other offices around the world. But Utah kind of leads the culture, the overall company culture of the company. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of really successful companies come out of Utah, is because of this very point. It's, you know, we have diverse companies.
Buy your own bootstraps and...
and we'll help you find location for TechCrunch Utah.
I know, I always say I need to go out there and take our film crew out to Utah. You guys have been lovely. Thank you so much for coming on stage with me.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks,
It's
Sarah.
awesome.